Good evening, everyone. Starting up here 1 minute early. I hope everyone can see me. Let's see here. Lane, if I'm coming through, if you can send me a message so I know that I'm here virtually. Let's see here. Hello, Celine. Hope it's not just you and me right now. Hope it's more than just us. So, we are starting just a bit. Tonight's unit, compared to last week, the Unit 5 unit was a rather long unit, and we weren't able to get to all of it because it was so much stuff, and some units are like that. Tonight's unit is a little more accommodating here because it delves into, in this case, the development unit, and it's not too terrible. It's much more reasonable compared to other ones. So, all right. And the weird thing, of course, is that the chat comes in and it doesn't sync live to what I'm saying right now. So for all I know, I'm saying something and the chat reflects what I said 2 minutes ago, maybe. Okay, so I'm seeing the yes messages right now saying, am I coming in? And that was about a minute and a half ago. And this is the lag that we have to kind of get used to here. I'm halfway through the crams right now. I'm still not used to it. So, all right. So let's get started here. Once I figure out how to get I should know this by now, but here we go. Share screen. Chrome tab. There it is. And away we go. So I'm going to have some time for questions. That's my plan anyway. We'll see exactly. But that is my plan here. And captions. And away we go. All right. So when we talk about development here, and by the way, the disclaimer, obviously, this is public or sort of public. Assume that the public can see this. So you might have to change your name on Zoom if necessary. So, all right, our social media. If you don't know it by now, then you will never know it. If you get the song reference, great. If not, maybe it's an A push. It'd be kind of sad if it's an A push, but that was the 1980s. All right. We start off with this concept of maturation. Maturation, by its definition, is growth over time. And more specifically to our purposes, or for our purposes, it is growth that can occur basically biologically. It's growth that happens regardless of environmental influences, or largely independent of environmental influences. I mean, yes, we need to have, in order for us to grow biologically, we need to have food, water, oxygen. Obviously, all those things are necessary for life and obviously for maturation. But we know that when deprived of certain environmental stimuli or enrichment from our environment, that could affect our growth. But maturation can occur more or less independent of that our body will still grow. We see people who were deprived in horribly depraved conditions, and they for many years, and yet they were still able to grow physically in some ways. So there is still maturation that's occurring. So that's what we mean by maturation. It's a term there that could appear on an FRQ, and understand it's basically growth that can occur independent of environmental influences. So two types of research. I'm going to say, gosh, didn't we do research in Unit 2 or in Unit 1, excuse me? And I'd say yes, but there's another type here that kind of is specific to this unit, where they are specifically geared towards comparing ages or periods of life of development. And one is called cross-sectional, where essentially you are going to study all different age groups or different age groups. Let's say I'm studying 3 different age groups. It could be more than 3. It could be 2 in theory. But let's say I'm studying certain age groups. And cross-sectional allows me to study all of those age groups all at one time. So we'll study 5-year-olds, 50-year-olds, and 100-year-olds, making these numbers up, all at one time. So here it is. It's 2021 as I say this. I almost said 2020. It's 2021, and I'm going to give a survey to 5-year-olds, as best as I can read it, a survey to 50-year-olds, and a survey to 100-year-olds. And I'm going to ask them to complete the survey, and I can compare all the data. So I could say, for example, what are your views on coronavirus? And or let me say it this way. I should say the reason why I have this here is it could be about coronavirus. It could be about the political environment, anything. But the thing is that when I do that, the problem with that is that each of these age groups have experienced different things, okay? So kids, the 5-year-olds, the 10-year-olds, they are experiencing this COVID pandemic and the lockdown and everything associated with it. And so let's say I'm asking about their political views and forget about the politics of all this, but we could all agree that how they view the pandemic and everything else could affect their political views, whether conservative, liberal, moderate, whatever it might be. But then if I assess, let's say, the 40 or 50-year-olds, they saw 9/11. They witnessed 9/11. And in addition to the COVID, they saw 9/11, and that could flavor their political views. And if I also survey the 100-year-olds, and not just 100-year-olds, but let's say 70, 80, 90-year-olds, and 60-year-olds too, and depending on how old they are, maybe in the 50 age range as well, they witnessed the Vietnam War. Some may have served in Vietnam or served in the military in some capacity during Vietnam. The Vietnam War. And so as a result, that can influence how they view politics one way or the other. It doesn't matter how for our purposes. But the point is that the fact that they witnessed Vietnam and the other 2 age groups did not, that could have some influence on it. Maybe it does, maybe it does not. But the point is that different age groups have seen different things. And so that can influence how they view the world. This is what they call the cohort effect. In other words, if I'm going to compare different age groups in a cross-sectional study, there's the problem. This is the cohort effect, that different age groups have seen different things. And so this cohort or group of people who are kind of experiencing more or less the same things or similar things, that might influence their outlook on life, their view of the world. And that could be a potential confounding variable. Well, one way I can kind of go about that is do a different type of research study. Now, bear in mind, cross-sectional study allows me to study a group of people all at one time. And I have this timeline here, and this represents one point in time. Well, the other way is a longitudinal study. It's called a longitudinal study because it takes a long time. Well, but that's one way of remembering it, at least. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to assess the same group of people over the time span. So I could do a study in which I study people, and I study them when they are 5-year-olds, and then 50-year-olds, and 100-year-olds. And of course, this is obviously a much different type of study, which has its own problems. For one thing, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money. If you're doing a 100-year longitudinal study, guess what? Chances are you're not going to see the completion of the study if you started at the beginning. And there's also mortality. Literally, people could actually die, and that happens in longitudinal studies, but also people drop out. People are no longer interested. You lose the names and addresses of people over time. You lose track of people. That's what I mean by mortality. It could mean literal mortality. It could also mean just participation mortality, which you wouldn't get in a cross-sectional study because you do it all at once. Here's a survey, 15 minutes later, we're done. You're not going to get that type of problem. And obviously, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of money, too, with a longitudinal study. So both have pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages. Which is better? It depends upon what it is you're trying to do for a particular purpose. Not one says it's better than another. So, okay, now when we talk about development, we are talking about from conception to death. When I say from conception to death, I'm not here to have some political or moral debate about when life begins. That's not the point. What we can, though, say is that when the egg and the sperm meet, that's when development begins. A sperm by itself cannot develop. An egg by itself cannot develop. But when the egg and the sperm meet at conception, development begins. Now, when you think life begins, is a very staunch, or not staunch, but it's a very emotional debate, and one we're not going to have here. But the point being, that's when development begins. So when we say it's from womb to tomb, we're not making a political statement. We're just saying, hey, development begins at this point. So prenatal development, we are talking about what before birth, the development that happens before birth. The zygote stage, or the germinal stage, when the zygote forms, the egg and the sperm meet, conception occurs, cell division begins, and then there's implantation in the uterine wall, which creates the formation of the placenta, that big spongy layer of tissue that enables nutrients and waste to be passed back, nutrients be given to the baby from the mother, and the waste to be taken away from the baby by the mother. So that's the germinal stage. This is zygote, and it's there's no law that says it has to be the exact 14 exact days. It could vary, but approximately the first 2 weeks. The first 2 weeks it happens here. Then it goes into the embryonic stage, where it's called an embryo, formation of vital organs, formation of the eyes, the heart, the lungs, the brain, all start to occur around roughly weeks 2 to 10. And then the third stage, the fetal stage, here it stops looking like a tadpole, looks more like an actual baby. It can start to move, formation of the limbs, and here it reaches the age of viability, where the age of viability being when a child can live independently of the mother. When I say live independently, I'm not talking about can go off to college and get a job and be self-providing, meaning that can literally biologically live independently of the mother. When are they able to do that? Some textbooks say 26 weeks. That the exact time is not it's not set in stone, and with current technology, with supports, a child could be born premature, but still have a good chance of surviving as our technology improves and everything else. All right. There are things, though, that could affect prenatal development. There are things that could affect the development of that child. And again, when I'm saying child here, I'm just not trying to make a political statement. It's just saying for nomenclature here. So the well in utero, certain things could happen. Perhaps the mother takes certain substances, or she's in an environment where there's a lot of pollution. And there are certain things that could affect the prenatal development adversely that we call teratogens. Teratogens are these things that could affect the prenatal development in some way, and not in a good way. And there are a couple things here. Forget the source John Mull for a second here. That's going to be something else. Alcohol, nicotine, fetal alcohol syndrome, nicotine if a mother smokes during pregnancy, that can have an adverse effect. Perhaps you've heard of thalidomide. Thalidomide was a drug that was designed to help women combat morning sickness, because if you know anything about pregnancy, morning sickness for many pregnant women could be very, very debilitating, or just an annoyance at the very least. And thalidomide was a drug that could help cure those symptoms, but as it turned out, it caused massive birth defects. Certain things that can, certain developmental disorders include trisomy 21, Tay-Sachs disease, PKU. The exact mechanisms of each are not too terribly important in terms of what causes each, but trisomy 21, 3 pairs of chromosomes on the 21st chromosome. Tay-Sachs disease is a disease that can cause early childhood death, very rare. PKU is where a child lacks, I believe, a certain enzyme to break down a certain amino acid, and if they catch it early, then a child has to, and into their adulthood, has to have a very restricted diet where they might have to avoid phenylalanine. That's why when you see, especially on diet drinks, pardon me, such as the one I'm drinking right here, it says phenylketonuria. I can never say that word correctly. Give me enough time when I'm not on camera, I can say it just right. But basically, a person with PKU would see that and say, "Oh my gosh, I can't have this, because if they ingest phenylalanine, then it can build up, and it can cause many medical problems, even death. So they have to be aware of that. So that PKU is another one of those developmental disorders. All right. So imprinting is something that not humans typically do, but many other animals do. It's basically the impression, whatever the first impression. Basically, I figure out who my parent is based upon whom I see first. So here I'm born, and if I see whatever I see becomes almost like stamped in my mind, becomes imprinted, and that becomes my that becomes my parent. And there's basically Conrad Lorenz did a series of very interesting studies where baby ducklings are born, and he raises them immediately, and basically they see him and they assume, oh my gosh, you're the mother. And so there's video of him walking around, the ducks are following him, and he's swimming, and the ducks are swimming with him, because the baby ducklings see Lorenz and they say, oh my gosh, you're the mother. And it becomes like stamped in their mind that you are the mother. Human babies don't do this. No, at least we don't have evidence that they do this in any real capacity. So, all right, babies born, they have certain tricks. They have certain things that they can do, and that some of these go away after a certain number of months, maybe a little longer. One of the first things they do is sucking. You put something in a baby's mouth, it sucks. It's a survival mechanism. Now, Freud assumed that it was a means for them to get pleasure, more on that in a different unit, but Freud gets this wrong. It's just a reflex that happens. It's an instinctual reflex to help the baby feed, namely breast milk. Obviously, a nipple of a bottle, the baby just sucks. And as I like to joke, being a father of 3 kids, if you want to exfoliate your thumb, put it in a baby's mouth, and it'll be just, your thumb will be very smooth because they suck so much. So, and now if you know anything about breastfeeding, it's not as simple as putting the nipple into the baby's mouth and the baby just starts to eat. There's a technique to breastfeeding, and when a mother becomes a new mother, gives birth to usually to her first child, and sometimes needs refreshers with their children, with more children, subsequent children. They have to learn the technique of getting a good latch. That is where the baby latches onto the mother's nipple. And one of the things they teach, and I'm taking what can be at first a very complicated, daunting process and simplifying it. One of the things they tell the mother to do is take the nipple and stroke the baby's cheek, because what happens here, that fires off a reflex called the rooting reflex. And then there's more to it, by the way, but this is one basic idea. And when you stroke a baby's cheek, what happens here, especially if the baby's hungry, it will turn its mouth in the direction of where the stimulus is stroking the baby's cheek, and opens the mouth. Okay, again, so that they can start to feed. So it is this reflex that they have, this rooting reflex. It disappears after about a year or so. Eventually, the baby learns how to just latch on without needing to get that reflex being fired off. The gripping reflex, you put something in the baby's hand, the baby grips the finger, and it grips rather tightly. There's video out there of John Watson, famous behavioral psychologist, where he takes video or film, and the baby latches onto his finger, and he lifts the baby up in the air, and the baby's dangling by up in the air. I'm not saying that was right. I'm saying it's actually quite wrong. His lab assistant was there to catch the baby. The baby did fall. And I only said, and I only laugh because it's just so incredulous that someone would do something like that. I mean, the babies weren't harmed, but there is video out there. If you search for it, it's rather remarkable. It shows how strong the baby's grip can be because it's a reflex there. The swimming reflex, you put a baby into water in a certain situation, it'll start to kind of move its body in almost a salamander-like fashion. Some claim that you can teach a baby to swim doing this by firing off that reflex. Others dispute that. I've heard both sides of that story. But you can't just throw the baby into a swimming pool and it swims like Michael Phelps. It doesn't work like that. But it's kind of the survival mechanism that early on from our earliest ancestors, we fell into water. Maybe we have a chance of survival by moving our way out of the water, perhaps swimming in a way. So the Babinski reflex is a neat reflex where if you go up to a person's foot, not that you would, but if you go up to a person's bare foot and you stroke the bottom of their foot, typically the toes might curl down. But with the Babinski reflex, what happens here is that when you stroke the finger, or the foot, I should say, the toes curl upwards. And babies tend to do this within the first 6 months to the year of life. If they are doing it into adulthood, it could be the sign of something indicating, some people with Parkinson's, with certain neurological disorders, with, I think, Lou Gehrig's disease, perhaps, might actually start showing the Babinski as an adult. But but a person can have Babinski reflex in adulthood and still be perfectly healthy. It could just be a sign of something sometimes. And so sometimes when they do examinations of adults, they might test the reflexes. And one of the things they might do is stroke the foot to see if you're showing Babinski reflex. The moral reflex is where if the baby feels like it's falling in some way, it will thrust its arms and legs out to kind of brace for impact. Especially also if the head is not supported. This also happens too. The arms and the legs will kind of flail out a bit. That's the moral reflex. The galant reflex, if you stroke the side of a baby's back, it will arch in the direction of where it was just stroked. That's the galant reflex. And then the fencing reflex. This is one that, if, with the exception of Babinski, I wouldn't necessarily try any of these at home because, well, especially the swimming reflex, I wouldn't do that. But if you put a baby on its back, and you might, if you have a baby brother or sister or cousin or something, or maybe you babysit babies, and you put a baby on its back, what happens here is that one arm goes out and the other one curls up, and I can't do this while sitting here, but one leg goes up as if it were fencing. If you Google fencing reflex baby, you'll see plenty of great examples with that. So that's the fencing reflex. The critical period is a time that where the most learning occurs, or I should say optimal learning, or optimal opportunity for learning, that a baby should be exposed to as much as possible. And if deprived of environmental stimuli, then that could very seriously affect adversely development later on in life, especially cognitive development. We've seen case studies of children, the famous one being the case of Jeannie, who was literally locked in a closet for the first maybe 7 to 10 years of her life, giving just literally in a dark room most of her time. And when she was finally rescued by social workers, she found that she could not really talk much, she couldn't talk, and it was a very, very horrific thing that was seen. And so the point being that they tried to teach her how to talk, and she learned to make very, very basic word structured sentences, not like formal sentences with subject, verb, predicate, and all that stuff, and or conjugation and whatnot. But with the very intense tutoring, was able to get maybe some very basic ideas across. But she was never able to fully talk, or talk like I say normal, like you and I could talk, because she missed that critical period, being able to learn all that stuff. And so I'm not saying that you can turn a baby into a genius by having them watch, nothing but the History Channel and playing nothing but Mozart. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that it's this time where most learning could occur because those synapses are being created, the connections are being created there that will help later learning in life. Mary Ainsworth did a very famous study with babies and the strange situation. Okay, the strange situation was this: a mother and a stranger, and the exact setup is not terribly important to know for the AP exam, but just to give you some background to this. Mother and a stranger walking around. Now, a stranger is not a stranger to the mother. They've met before, so it's not like this is like a perfect stranger, but a stranger to the child. a woman that a child's never seen before. So they will basically, first it's the mother and the child in this room, a room that the child's never been in before. The stranger then sits in the room with the mother. The mother and the stranger talk for a little bit, and then the mother gets up and walks out of the room, leaving the child with the stranger. Obviously, not like completely alone. I mean, there's people watching through two-way mirrors and everything, and they wanted to see how the child would react. Well, to make very complicated and nuanced research simplified here, there were a series of different types of reactions here. One was called the secure. With the secure attachment, the child was not bothered by the mother leaving. The child was still playing with the toys, was still exploring around him or her, try to make interaction with the stranger, try to talk to the stranger. Not talk to the stranger, but it showed interest in the stranger. And then when the mother came back, it was a happy reunion. A second one was the anxious ambivalent attachment, where mother leaves and the child is very angry. The child doesn't want to talk to doesn't want to interact with the stranger, doesn't want to play with the toys, just really, really crying. And when the mother comes back, it's a not happy reunion. It's more like a clingy, how dare you leave me? How dare you walk away from me type of clinginess. That was the anxious ambivalent. And then the avoidant, mother leaves, child doesn't care. Doesn't want to talk to the stranger, just wants to be by themselves. And when it comes back, doesn't even want to be picked up by the mother. Just wants to, just wants them to be. Well, what Ainsworth found, or what other researchers found, was that this type of relationship tended to predict the type of relationships people would have later in life. Secure attached babies would have healthy social relationships, or tend to have healthy social relationships. Anxious ambivalent tend to have more shallow type of relationships, tend to have maybe very clingy, but not very closely intimate. And avoidant people, in this case, tend to want to keep themselves, tend to be loners. And again, it wasn't just like you fit into one of three neatly and that was it. But that was essentially what Ainsworth found. To take, again, a very great and complicated amount of research and kind of simplifying it there. So now Harry Harlow did an interesting series of studies that by today's standards would be completely unethical, would never pass an institutional review board. Not even close would they ever pass an institutional review board. But back in those days, the idea of an IRB was in its infancy, and so basically you can do almost what you wanted. And what basically there was this idea. There were a few ideas that were rather, looking back, bad, that as unethical as Harlow's research may have been, gave us some very important information. Back in those days, going back to the 1950s, mothers were taught that the child don't coddle the child, like leave the child in their crib. They even discourage breastfeeding because the child has to learn to be independent and will learn to love you and everything. And yet also at the same time, they learned the bonds. They had this Freudian idea that bonding occurred because the mother was the provider of breast milk and everything else and was able to feed. That's why a child learned to love the mother. But what Harlow did was he would take these rhesus monkeys and would isolate, basically take them away from their mother at birth and have them raised by these surrogate mothers, basically these two wired mothers, these two wired frame things that were made to kind of look like a monkey. And one had a bottle and the other one had a cloth, a terry cloth. So one was able to provide the food and the other one was able to provide comfort, kind of like this nice touch. And again, taking rather complicated series of research studies and simplifying it here. Well, when presented with very scary stimuli, the monkey tended to run towards the one with the cloth. And not the one with the milk. Yes, it would go to the one with the milk when it was hungry, but it would actually spend most of its time with the cloth mother, indicating that the mother who was able to protect, to provide assurance, provide contact comfort. And actually, the technical findings of the study were a lot more complicated than that. And frankly, just saying it was contact comfort is kind of incorrect. But for our purposes, say it was contact comfort. That it was a very important thing. And Harlow also did studies where basically what happens if you give no contact comfort. You just put in a room and with a bottle, and that was it. And they found that literally the monkeys had to be euthanized because they were mentally in such bad shape. They were anxious, nervous, and everything. And you could say that's horrible, and I'd agree with you. Yet at the same time, it taught us, hey, you know what? It's very important. It's very, very important to have that to have the human touch. And it said to us, touch the infant. They teach about infant massage, for example. Have that bond. Having skin to skin contact is very, very important. Much different than we thought in the 1950s. In the 1950s, they were discouraging breastfeeding, and now we know that if a woman is able to and is willing, that she should be encouraged to do it as much as she can, and as she's willing to. So, and not to discourage it. That being the idea, at least. So, okay. So basically, show the mother's more of the protector, and not the provider. Now, Diana Baumrin was another researcher who did research with parenting styles. And I'm sure that if we were to sit here and talk about how our parents are as parents, and no, we're not going to do that, and how they discipline, I'm sure we could get a variety of different types of responses. And again, it's not like one falls neatly into these categories I'm about to describe. But she found that there were several types here. There was actually other types too, but for our purposes, we're going to stick to these three types. Basically, three ways of raising a child. The first one being the authoritarian parent. Now, if you know anything, if you take AP Gov or are interested in government, you know about authoritarian governments, where they're very dictatorial. It's strict laws, and it's my way or the highway. Don't speak out against me. And that's what the authoritarian parents are like. It's like very strict rules, very little flexibility, harsh punishments for breaking the rules. You are 5 minutes past your curfew and you're grounded for 3 weeks. Which is pretty harsh, but okay. So, but that's authoritarian parents. Permissive parents are the complete opposite. Let their child do whatever you want. Where are you going? I'm going out to a concert. Okay, see you when I see you. Very few rules, very little enforcement of the rules. Consequences are non-existent. And by the way, these are like the extreme examples. And more or less, the idea is that we're going to fall somewhere or show features of each at some time or another. But what do we tend to fall into? Okay. And the last one being authoritative. With authoritative parenting, the child's given flexibility, the child's given the ability to explore. Yes, there are consequences for breaking the rules, but they're reasonable. Yes, there are expectations, but the child has the ability to maybe negotiate. They have the ability they have flexibility, they have options. There's a give and take. It's like the best of both worlds of the authoritarian and permissive. There's boundaries, but they're reasonable. So, and not surprisingly, this had developmental implications later on in life. Children of authoritarian parents had difficulty doing their own things by their own, taking the initiative to do things. Children of permissive parenting tended to have trouble with the law or being in situations where there was a structure, whereas authoritative children or children of authoritative parents tended to do best. They were able to explore, give options, negotiate, communicate, and so forth. Again, it's not to say that parents fall neatly into one of these three and that's it. These were categories that tended to be there. So, all right, we're going to move into stage theory here, talking about stage theory. And the idea about stage theory is that the theory behind it is that we go through certain episodes in our lives, and each episode or stage has a certain theme or issue or something to work out or a question you have to answer or something like that. There's different types of stage theories here, but this is the idea behind stage theory. And so when you're in a certain stage, like, okay, this is the main theme we have to worry about, or this is what you have to kind of grapple. This is what you have to kind of think about. They are age depends. The first stage is usually for the first couple of years of life, and then it goes into the second. So basically, it corresponds to a particular age, and they go in order. And so everyone goes through all the stages in the same order. We all go through the first stage or the second stage, how many stages there might be. And if you don't do it correctly, if you don't resolve the issues corresponding to that stage, then it's going to stick with you the rest of your life, or it's going to be something you're going to be constantly working on for the rest of your life. If you don't solve it then, it's going to kind of, unless you have professional intervention later on, it's just going to be a problem or be an issue for the rest of your life. Okay. One of those stage theories, famous stage theorist, is Erikson. Essentially, Erikson, he proposed these 8 stages, and yes, you do have to know them. They're not going to say which is the 6th stage, and you have to kind of say off the top of your head. That's not what they're going to say, but you should be familiar with all the stages. First one being trust versus mistrust. The first year of life of a baby. Basically, the question is, can I trust those around me? Can I put my faith in others? Are people going to love me, protect me? Are they going to provide for me? Are they going to help me live and survive? Do I have caring parents and caring people around me? That happens in the first year approximately of life. The second stage being autonomy versus shame and doubt. Autonomy is a fancy schmancy way of saying doing things independently. One of the big things that you have to deal with in this, around 2 to 3, let's say, is one of the big accomplishments you try to do is potty training. And Freud had his own strange ideas. That's going to be for another talk. But Erikson said, potty training is a very big deal, and it's a big deal in general. But because it's one of the first things the child tries to learn how to do independently without the assistance of others. Same thing also with eating, being able to eat with a spoon or eat with a fork and knife, being able to do it independently. And if I'm able to do it independently, great, fine. Otherwise, I will feel ashamed of myself. I'll be doubting myself the rest of my life. So Erikson might say, well, if you are doubting yourself throughout life, maybe during that age of 1 to 2, you didn't learn how to be autonomous. That's what Erikson might say. Likewise, if you have trust issues, maybe that first year of life, you couldn't trust those around you. Initiative versus guilt. Here, the word isn't quite as obvious or as clear in terms of its definition and application. But what happens here is that the child takes the initiative, or the child is wanting to go out and explore the world. The child wants to ask questions about the world, is very curious about things, is asking so many questions, wants to know why, wants to pretend, tries to do trial and error, through experimentation, through pretend play. Here you can have children who are playing house or playing, I don't know, but playing some fanciful game or with sticks or something like that. That could be something they're doing. And they're trying to take the initiative. And if not, then they feel like that they will have guilt later on in life. That's what Erikson says if they don't do this. Why that is, again, is a kind of complicated explanation, goes beyond the scope of this course. But also they learn the difference between right and wrong. They're also trying to learn the difference between right and wrong in this stage, because they're exploring the world and they have to learn about what is right and what is wrong. Industry versus inferiority, ages 6 to 11 approximately. Here you are trying out all sorts of things. With industry versus inferiority, what am I good at? What can I excel at? What am I decent at? What can I excel at? What am I, am I good at math? Am I good at sports? Am I good at singing? What can I do really well? What can I do that, that can occupy my time, that I can enjoy and do it well? Compared to, well, all right, I find something good. I'm not going to be good at everything, but I'll be good at something and I'll be great. But then, you know what? There's going to be times where I'm not going to be as good at things, and great, fine. But if I can't figure that out, then I will have a feeling of inferiority for the rest of my life. I'll feel like, gosh, I can't do anything right. I'm just terrible at everything if they don't resolve it at this stage. Identity versus confusion. Erikson would say that this is what most adolescents are dealing with right now. Who am I as a person? How do I fit in this world? what are my beliefs? What are my values? Who am I as a person? And when I figure that out, great. Otherwise, I might be confused and doubt myself, for the rest of my life. Intimacy versus isolation. Here, you're trying to find love, or if not love, friendship, social network of friends, people in whom you can confide, people that you can trust. Like, I don't want to say just trust, because that's the first stage, but people that you can share your innermost feelings. It could be sexual relationships, it could be just general friendships, but you're really focusing that in life. Generativity versus stagnation. Here, you are trying to be a productive member of society, having a good job, providing for your family, being a good civil servant. And then finally, integrity versus despair. You look back on your life and say, did I live a good life? Did I live a happy life? Am I happy with all the things I have done? Yes, I've made mistakes. Yes, everything's been perfect, but am I satisfied with what has happened in my throughout this life? So that's Erikson stages there. Lawrence Kohlberg and moral reasoning. Here with Lawrence Kohlberg, he was interested in this idea that how we judge right and wrong is kind of dependent on development. That how we view right and wrong goes through reincarnations and reiterations and everything else. And he basically had 3 general stages with 2 substages, 6 substages overall. I usually just stick to the 3 here because they don't get that more specific. But each of the 2 substages I kind of described within each general stage. So with pre-conventional moral reasoning, children try to avoid punishment and gain rewards. And that's basically the 2 substages there. One is to avoid punishment. Like we first try to avoid the punishments, and then we try to gain the rewards as we grow a little older. So, but basically we try to avoid punishment and gain rewards, but we make our decisions based upon what avoids the punishment and what gets us the reward. Kohlberg basically came up with these ideas by giving moral dilemma puzzles or moral dilemma stories to people, where these people would read this story and was the person right to do this, or what should the person do? And what you chose was a matter of opinion. But it was interesting, or your opinion, I should say. But what was interesting was the reasoning a person would give for why, yes, it was right, or no, it was wrong, or he should do A or she should do B. There is a variety of different reasons. This is how he's categorizing it. So if a child says, well, it was right for the person to do it because, hey, they got an ice cream sundae out of it, well, right there, that's a pre-conventional thing. Or no, the person shouldn't do that because if they do, they're going to get spanked for it. Well, that's going to be a punishment. So they're trying to avoid the punishment. That's pre-conventional thinking. Conventional thinking revolves around being a good person and following the laws. A bad person wouldn't do this, so that's why they should do the other thing. Or they should do it because that's what good people do. Following the rules, following the laws, following the norms or mores of the culture, following the 10 Commandments, or following whatever religious code people might have. Well, a person should follow the rules. Well, if a person wants to be a good member of society, that's what they should do or should not do. That's conventional moral reasoning. Post-conventional moral reasoning is, there's 2 subscales here. First, a social construct, like the idea is that one person should do what is best for other people. Like, we're all in it together, and there are times when I'm going to scratch your back, and there are times when you should scratch my back. And so a person has a responsibility to be a good member, to kind of help others. It's part of being a good member of this great world we live in, and we owe a responsibility to other people. That's the idea behind that. And it should say social contract, by the way. It says social contract. That contract is a mistake. Social contract. And then the last one of this post-conventional is what's sometimes referred to as universal norms, self-chosen, abstract, ethical standards, where you develop your own idea of right and wrong. It might transcend the rules of society. Yes, the law says that this is right, but you know what? there are some things more important than law. What is good overall, there are times when we should be breaking the law because it leads to a much greater outcome in the long run or something like that. That would be post-conventional moral reasoning. Now, Kohlberg did this research and collects all the data, and what he finds is that men were given more post-conventional moral reasoning explanations, and women were given more conventional moral reasoning explanations. And let me just say, this is Kohlberg who is saying this, not John Moll who is saying this, but Lawrence Kohlberg who is saying this, when he said that, so therefore men tend to have greater moral reasoning than women. Again, that's Kohlberg who is saying it, not Moll who is saying it. Well, enter Carol Gilligan, who is one of Kohlberg's students, actually, a graduate student of Kohlberg, and a critic of basically that conclusion. Now, Gilligan says, data is data or data. Yeah, that's what the data show us. But it's not that men are at a higher level of moral reasoning. It's a different level of moral reasoning, but it's not a higher level of moral reasoning. You see, women, especially in the 1950s when this data were being collected, okay, so that's very important to understand here, that when these data were being collected, women were taught that the ideal person was one who was caring and compassionate, one who would help others, being a good person, which is more conventional. Whereas men were taught this idea of justice and order and maintaining things in society, and this idea of social contract being more of that ideal. So yes, the data show things, but it's not that one is greater than the other, but just that they are different. And that's a distinction there. Not that one is greater than the other, but they are just different. So, all right, Jean Piaget is another big name you need to know here. Some concepts here associated with this. First off, this almost goes back to the cognitive psychology unit, but assimilation has to do with schemas, a mental conceptualization of things. And when you do assimilation, what you're doing here is you are taking a new idea and incorporating it into an already pre-existing, pre-established schema that fits very nicely into the schema. So you have this idea of what a bird is. A bird is anything that has wings. I know that's wrong, but bear with me here. Or for our purposes, let me step back. It's not always, there's more to it, but so I have in my schema of a bird, a robin, a blue jay, a cardinal, an owl, and I see a parrot for the first time, and someone says, "Oh, it's a parrot." Yes, that's a parrot. It's a bird, and so I incorporate parrot into my already pre-existing schema of what a bird is. Well, then I see a bat and it says, "Oh gosh, look, it's a bat. It has wings. It's a bird." And they say, "Well, no, it's not. It's not a bird." You're like, "What? How can that possibly be?" But it has wings. I know a bat. Some people don't call it wings, but again, bear with me here. And so someone says to me, "Well, just because it's a winged creature doesn't make it a bird. There are things with wings that are not quite birds." And the kid says, "Oh gosh, what do I have to do?" Well, feathered wings, we're going to say. Anything with feathered wings is going to be a bird. Oh, okay. So you see, what I had to do there is I had to change my schema in order to learn that information. Because what I was learning did not fit my pre-existing schema, I had to change the schema, and that's accommodation. Okay, that's accommodation. That's different from the accommodation of the eye, which is in chapter 3, where the lens changes shape as an object draws closer. That's nothing to do with this type of accommodation. Those are two completely different things. So Piaget's stages, these are very well known. If you're going to be a teacher, you're going to be hearing about them again and again and again. The sensory-motor stage happens from about birth to 2 years. And in this stage, they are learning sensory motor processes. They're learning hand-eye coordination. They're making sense of the world around them in some way. They develop in this stage, and that by the end of this stage, they have mastered this concept of object permanence. Object permanence is where you have, if I'm showing, Theodore's about 15 months old now, my youngest son. If I show him a ball he's interested in it and then I cover it up, he might lose interest in it because he sees the ball, and if it's out of sight, then suddenly it's out of mind. Now, if I do that to you and I show you, let's say, a soccer ball and I cover it up, you know that the balls right there, because you have developed object permanence. This is why, by the way, peekaboo works so well with babies, because here, as far as a baby is concerned, I'm not here, and then suddenly I reappear. Now, if I do this to you, you have object permanence, and you're like, this is so stupid. Well, to a baby, they haven't developed that yet. So they're developing object permanence, and then by the end of the sensory-motor stage, they have developed this object permanence. Now, the pre-operational stage happens approximately ages 2 to 7. Again, there's no laws about when exactly these stages occur. They are egocentric, meaning they can only see the world from their own point of view, not from the point of view of others. Where does the sun go at night? Well, it goes to bed. Why? Because the kids go to bed. So too does everyone else in the world. Try explaining time zones to a kid this age. Irreversibility is, in their mind, they're unable to undo a process in their mind. If I take a piece of paper and crumple it up, they would have difficulty undoing that crumpling of the paper in their mind. Like, that was a flat piece of paper once. Even if it was done right in front of them, they can't reverse the process in their mind. Centration means they can only see it as is. So if I crumple a ball of paper, they can only see it as a ball of paper crumpled up and not see it as anything else. They can only see it the way it actually is. And they lack conservation. If I take a gallon of milk and I pour it into a container, let's say it's taller or a different shape, but it holds all of it, you would know that there's the same amount. But a child this age might say, well, the one on the one side has more because it's taller. Even though it's skinnier, that's why it's taller. They're unable to perceive consistency in different shaped objects. In other words, a person who has conservation would know that amount does not change just because the shape of the object has changed. If I take a cup of water, I pour it into a tall, skinnier glass, it's not like it has more or less all of a sudden. It has the same amount of water. It's just that one is taller. You have conservation, you're able to do that, but a kid at this age would not. Concrete operational stage, ages 7 to 12, they're able to understand logic. That's the big thing here. They can understand sequencing. They can understand, if A equals B and B equals C, therefore A equals C. They're able to do that. The formal operational stage, approximately ages 12 and older, they're able to think in abstract ways. Be able to think in hypothetical terms, like what happens if an alternative thing happened in history. They're able to kind of think in that way. That's very abstract. That Piaget says is the last stage there. Lev Vygotsky was a Soviet psychologist, a Soviet developmental psychologist, who you could do a whole course on Vygotsky and Piaget and how they differ in their points of view. But basically, Vygotsky says that learning, development is a social construct. But Piaget says it just happens. Vygotsky says, well, it kind of happens, but you also need this environmental support, this idea of scaffolding, where new knowledge is built with the assistance of others. When I learn a new concept, I need other people to help me learn that. I just don't learn spontaneously. I just don't learn by myself. I just don't suddenly look at something and, I know I need the input of others. I need the guidance of others. I need the assistance of others. I need the supervision of others. And that will help me build new knowledge. They provide like the supports and I build on it. And that's the idea behind scaffolding. The zone of proximal development is basically the difference between what a child can do by themselves, indicated by the inner circle, and the child's ability that whatever they can do with the assistance of others, okay? And what they're able to do with the assistance of others more than what they were able to do just by themselves is the zone of proximal development. And the idea is that as we do this, the inner circle gets larger and larger because we're constantly scaffolding on top of that. Adolescent development. Primary sex development, basically it's all things in the body that are specific to reproduction. Menarche for the female sex and spermarchy for the male sex, menarche being when the woman has her first menstrual cycle and is releasing eggs for potential fertilization, potential conception, whereas with the male sex, they are producing sperm for potential conception. And that starts to happen in adolescence. Whereas secondary sex characteristics are not necessary to reproduction, but they have an indirect role in the reproductive process. The voice changes, body hair, body changes, broader shoulders for the male, larger hips for the woman. It just start to happen at this time that are not necessary for reproduction, but in some indirect, perhaps evolutionary way, assist with that. All right, finally, neural development. Basically, what we know from this is that the brain goes through a developmental phase. It actually doesn't fully develop until our early 20s. There's more myelinization, more of that fatty layer on the myelin sheath on the axon that leads to more or faster transmission down the axon, and in theory, more firing of the neurons, meaning more brain activity. The prefrontal cortex is the last thing to develop fully. The prefrontal cortex does not develop fully until our early 20s. So even though in adolescents, I think we're very mature adults, well, the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed at this point. So those are two major things to know about neural development at this point. So, all right. With that, I'm going back to the I did misspell trisomy 21. I apologize for that, but yes. So, or no, I got it right. I'm sorry. Yeah, Down syndrome is trisomy 21. So, all right. I didn't misspell it. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong thing. So, all right. So with 5 minutes left, I'm sure as I'm saying this, what I just said about a minute ago is still finishing up for you to see, but I'll answer any questions we might have. So this is where I do the awkward wait for the chat to catch up to what I'm saying. So I like to take some time for some questions. So irreversibility, again, refers to this idea of being to mentally reverse or mentally rewind an idea in your head. So if I'll give you a demonstration here. Just a second. Okay, I have here a paper towel. Okay, and so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to rip it up into 4 pieces. Okay. And I could say to you, okay, now, could you make this into one or make it look like what it used to look like? Obviously, with some tape or whatever, but like, could you put it back together in your mind? They would be unable to rewind the tearing so that it was all one piece again. They because that is reversibility is the ability to do it, but irreversibility means they are unable to do it. So generativity refers to the Eriksonian stage of being able to generate. When we say generativity, we're talking about to generate, to make, to generate income for the family, to generate productive things to the community, to provide things to the community, to leave an impact on the community in some way. That's what we mean by generativity. Other questions? What other questions might you have? So the zone of proximal development, again, if let's say you're trying, let's say you're learning to play the piano for the first time, or after a couple rudimentary lessons, you're kind of able to play the piano, play a few notes, but you're not able to do it really well. Then your piano teacher comes to you and kind of talks you through some things and maybe point to a couple things or whatever it might be. Then you might find that you do it a little bit better. You're able, okay, I kind of do this, now that you're here, I'm kind of able to do a little bit better. What was the difference between what you were able to do by yourself and what you were able to do with the assistance of others? That difference is the zone of proximal development. what you're able to do with the assistance of others. To Mark's question, yes, there is that big, massive cram. It's in what, 2 or 3 weeks? I have to look at my calendar here. It's a 4-hour cram, and where is I looking at my thing? It is. It's over here somewhere. Oh, wait a minute. It is maybe April 15th. Or no, maybe it's actually no. I don't have that. I'm looking at a very busy calendar here, but basically, oh, wait a minute, it might be. No, actually, it's going to be a little later than that. The point is, I don't have the. It's like the 4-hour cram. 5 hours because there's also like something in between as well. So, but yeah, I'll be cramming for 4 hours. So, yeah, it's right before the AP exam. I'm losing track of my. First of all, there is no open book exam. The College Board was very clear that you're not to be using notes. It's not meant for you to do that. So, I have no recommendation. You take whatever you're more comfortable taking. So, thank you, Lynn. It's okay. Yeah, it's whatever. So it's in May. So, I haven't thought that far ahead. I haven't thought that as far ahead as Wednesday yet. So. No, it's not open book. The AP exam is not open book. They've made that very clear. So, yeah, the online one is not open book. They made that clear. They said, if we find that you're using notes, they could cancel your score. That's what they said. So, that's not my understanding of it. I mean, what they said was this. They said that they would ask the questions that checking your notes wouldn't do any good. That's my understanding of it. So, because if you're constantly looking up your notes for one thing, you're gonna run out of time. That's so. So yeah, that's the idea. All right. With that, I'm at the 7:00 hour now. Thank you very much for your time and attention and your questions. Lena, our amazing teaching assistant, will be answering questions during the TA hour, which is at some point, which, like I said, Lena, I know you're on top of that. And if Lena was not here, I'd fall apart. So, as a matter of fact, I think all 5 will fall apart without Lena. So, all right. With that, folks, have a great night, and unless you're like in the West Coast, and good afternoon. And I will see you, I believe, on Thursday, Wednesday or Thursday, one of those dates, but it's on the calendar. So, take care, everyone.